So Jeff, we're hanging out at PorkFest 2022. You are camped right across the way from me, and you saw I had probiotics and shared a little bit that you were into regenerative grazing and agriculture, and I'm curious to know more.
Very good. Well, so I guess we're both working with soil, and that's an interesting thing. So I'm not actually farming, but I'm supporting farms who do use regenerative agriculture. And for the basic idea of regenerative agriculture is you can sequester cows off into paddocks, that are sizable for a day or two. They concentrate their mowing and output. They're eating and they're aerating the soil with their hooves, and then they're pooping onto the soil, and they're spreading that around. You concentrate that onto that single paddock for the day, and then you move them to the next paddock after a day or two or whatever it is. That initial paddock doesn't get the cows to come back on again for probably 2 to 3 weeks or something like that, until the roots have grown strong into the ground and the blades of grass are back and thriving and deep and thick. So in that way, this is the same way that the buffalo of North America built the Great Plains of America. Like over thousands of years, just, kind of doing passes over and over, and giving the grass that time to heal. And so you're sequestering the carbon in these deep roots going into the ground by, of course, the billions. And then you're also regenerating topsoil. So sequestering carbon and regenerating topsoil are the two biggest things about a regenerative ag. And so with this practice, and like if you have a land that's been monocultured or GMO cropped or something like that, then you'll have like a couple more techniques before you move the animals on or something like that. But the animals will be the final product. Some people say you can plant a couple different things, including hemp or other things, to like suck some of the stuff out before you get the cows on the land, so the cows aren't like eating that stuff growing in new grass or anything like that. So but the cows would be the final step, and I knew I was supporting for a while an Amish farmer who had just started doing exactly that. And he had, like, 2 years ago, there were these fields by him that were completely filled with GMO corn, and he stopped it all. He planted a couple bioaccumulators, got most of those out. Then he started with a couple, like, about 8 different strains of grass, and next thing you know, he's raising grass-fed cattle on them. And then the grass is growing thicker by the year.
So you saw that agriculture had this final stage of animals on top of the land. And so where did you get into regenerative agriculture, or why do you choose to work with those cultures in such a way? And don't mind Buster there. Hopefully you're you're, you're a dog person, because
I am. It's all good. Hi, buddy. So I initially I've been like, kind of heavy metal hippie for a long time. So I have always been, kind of earth first with a lot of stuff, because there is a way to live harmonically, and we're taking all these shortcuts right now, and it's frustrating to see people talk about, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, oh, well, we shouldn't eat meat because it's done poorly. And it's like, no, you don't stop eating meat, you just do it well. And so there was this, like, when I heard about regenerative agriculture, it was probably the 15 or something like that. And I was dealing with some health struggles while I was living in California, and it ended up being one of those things where, like, it all came to a head. I trained as a certified nutritional health coach. I was also up there doing cannabis therapy consultation training and stuff like that. So I ended up going complete carnivore for about 8 months, just to kind of check out my own struggles. And the guy who I had met was actually regeneratively raising a few cows literally 50 yards from my place where I was living. So it was just a no-brainer, and I purchased that cow from him, ate that cow, and it was one of the most delicious. To this day, it's probably in the top 2 most delicious animals I've ever eaten in my life. It was just so out in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't a highway for miles. So I don't know if sometimes people don't know that, like, if you're near a highway, then you collect even up to like a mile or two away. You collect a lot of like the stuff that the highway kicks up. The cars kick up brake dust and all the asphalt and stuff like that.
That
So,
makes sense too, and something a lot of people have not had the fortune to experience is that they've grown up eating McDonald's and they've grown up eating products of confined animal feeding operations, where when you get the burger at the end of the line, you have a few hundred different mixed animals that
yeah.
have been culturing for
yeah,
and
yeah.
without beneficial
Yeah,
inoculants introduced. And there's a vast difference, not only in the quality of the end result as far as meat and produce, but the quality of the life of that animal
Single origin.
in actually raising all that, doing it the organic way.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is a big part of, like, returning to. That's okay. You can sit down. We'll figure this out. All right, we got it. Um, um, so yeah, this is all a big part of, like, returning to consciousness with our food. It's a big part of, knowing, like, how. I love
It's a very cozy guy.
I love it. I love it. I want to get a dog so bad, and I can't right now just because I've been so old. I'm actually on the verge of possibly getting one, so this is just great. I'm super happy right
I'm
now.
glad.
But yeah, the reconnecting with our food, it's like, they call it David Icke used to call the totalitarian tiptoe, where it's like, you take one tiny little thing away one year, two tiny things the next year, two tiny things the next year, and it's like after a couple decades, like, wait a minute, where the fuck are all of our rights?
Yeah.
Where are all of our good food?
That did not take long.
Exactly, and we've been cutting, and sometimes they'll do it just in the way of, like, they'll create a regulation that makes it so you have to cut a corner in order to survive or something like that. So it's just not, this refractory thing you, like, to only see through the mirror, and it's not like a direct. Either way, reconnecting with the food, like, okay, we're saying, we're growing this food for ourselves. We're not worried about, like, making so much profit that we can completely, like, fund. Like, we don't want to be, millionaires doing this thing. We just want to, like, do it right. And then once it's done right, then that's what kind of drags people in. People are like, oh, you're doing it right? Okay, cool. I'll support that. It's conscious capitalism.
Absolutely. And it took me a few years of, kind of being mentored to get a full vision on permaculture and agriculture and soil and probiotics, to find that there were such thing as best practices and really, like, the best technologies that we know of and can utilize.
Right.
And so what are some of those for you? The authentic technologies, the best practices that are really holistic in that sense.
Yeah.
Hey. And reset that real quick.
We're good. All right. Hey.
This is what it's like to do it live.
Hey,
Porkfest 2022 with a dog in the meme machine.
So as far as, like, I'm not the one on the ground doing, like, okay, so I do have a flock of white Dorper sheep that I'm raising right now, and it's not, the practices aren't exactly where I want them to be, but hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years they'll be there. So all that to say, I'm not a regenerative farmer myself right now, so I'm not really looking, as far as, like, quote unquote technologies. Really, like, all it comes down to is grass and an electric fence. There is some mathematics. If you have a certain number of cows, then they're going to eat a certain number of grass each day. You have to make sure that you're changing their pastures at the appropriate times, establishing new boundaries with the electric fence, basically letting them into the big fresh pasture. And that's essentially the root of it. I mean, you can complicate things, like Joel Salatin down at Polyface Farms. You heard that name before? Yeah. So he's amazing. He's like he's a good old boy, Christian. He's been on his, like, grandfather had the land, so he's like third or fourth generation on that land. His son is now working the land with him, and they throw events there. He was one of the pioneers of this, like, technique, which is ultra fascinating, actually. So the idea is you run the cows across the land first, and then 3 days after the cows run across the land, you're running chickens in these chicken tractors. You seen the chicken tractors before? Yep. So for people who haven't heard, it's essentially just a box with cages over it so animals can't get in or out, and then you slowly move it, like, one tractor length, and it's called a tractor. It's just a box with a couple wheels on it, and the chickens get like a little sunlight. They get fresh salad bar every day, um, but you run them 3 days after the cattle, and that serves a couple different symbiotic purposes. And the first one, obviously, what I was just saying with the fresh food for the chickens on the daily, but 3 days is the incubation period for fly larvae. So the chickens are going to push out all the cow manure, and they're going to eat the fly larvae. So
Awesome. Yeah, those are a great protein source.
not only is it a great protein source, but it keeps the bugs down on the property. So you're like insect control and cutting down on your food budget at the same time.
And if you introduce the black soldier fly larvae, then you have the added benefit of you have flies without mouths.
Oh, nice.
They don't bite you. Yeah.
Nice. That's it. I didn't know about that one. That's cool.
Oh yeah, black soldier flies are
Black soldier
pretty fascinating little bugs.
All right. Fly. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah. They're yeah. Continue.
Yeah. So I mean, essentially, like there's a bunch of little tricks with this style of regenerative agriculture. Keeping the grass short around where the chickens are means that the predators um, of the chickens will not be able to creep up on them through short grass. If it's tall grass, the predators can creep right up on them. But if you keep it short, then hawks going overhead are going to keep the small predators, like they're not going to go out in the open because of the hawks. So it's kind of fascinating like that, like there's all these like tiny little bits and pieces that all
Yeah.
fit together, and it's all it's permaculture with animals, like it's permaculture. I guess can have animals in it, but yeah, I don't know. That's essentially a lot of the just the beginning part, meat and potatoes, is of what I'm most excited about as far as the technology with.
Yeah. So you're saying that you support farms that practice regenerative agriculture.
Sure.
What does that mean?
So I resell. I have packaged beef and pork and turkey, all that. Oh, and so it's essentially I'll find a farm who's doing it correctly, and then I'll buy an animal off of them, have it processed, and then I will move that animal through my friends, family, and resources.
Got it.
Yeah.
You partner up with regenerative farms. So
Yep.
are you are you actively looking for more regenerative farmers and
Absolutely, always.
more customers? Like, can
Always.
you ship any of that, or is
I'm
it a
not
local thing?
I don't have shipping capabilities just yet because that's like a whole thing.
So are you
that-
familiar with Farm Match too?
I am. I use Farm Match. Been using it for a couple of years for the
So
raw
you
milk.
do you vend off of that?
No.
Okay.
I'm black market.
Entirely. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um.
So
Okay.
I haven't
So
taken that leap yet.
what areas do you cover?
I'm essentially I will do almost essentially the entire Maryland area, up into PA a little bit. So there's a mobile butcher shop. We should talk about mobile butchery too. I'm training at a mobile butcher shop, and it's up in Reinhold's, PA, which is just in between Reading and Lancaster. So it's almost in the middle of the state kind of thing. And so I drive a ton. I'm actually looking to reduce that amount, but I'll service the Maryland areas centered out of Baltimore County. I have clients on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I have clients up into PA, down in Virginia. So and sometimes it's like sometimes they come and meet me, sometimes I come and meet them. It's whatever works for the week, and some people do just like they'll do like a smaller order just to get them by for like a couple weeks. Sometimes people do like a full-on quarter, half a cow, something like that. So I try and like make whatever people can need to be able to work, so, and sometimes in combination, pork, turkey, beef kind of thing, whatever they need, whatever fits in.
Yeah. Where can people get a hold of you if they're interested in the area to
Yeah.
either on the regenerative side or just customer side?
Yeah, the no website at this very moment, but you can always email me for details, and that's regenereat at pm.me, regenereat at pm.me.
Excellent.
Dig it.
Yeah, no, anybody who's interested in the area, I mean, this is the sort of thing that you want to get behind because this is decentralized agriculture supporting regeneration,
Yeah.
which is entirely antithetical to a one world health agriculture
There you go.
government finance system that's leading a lot closer to slavery than freedom.
Right.
So
Right. Hell yeah.
let's keep doing commerce on the freedom side.
That's right. Keep on rocking in the free world.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Did you want to talk about the butchery side for a second? Or are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. Let's
Yeah. That's because that's I see that as like the if like I was talking before, I was saying the if you're looking at like vertical integration as far as like being able to, you're raising the animals, you're processing the animals, packaging the animals, everything all together. Because usually what it is I see a bunch of incredibly kind-hearted, well-meaning, intelligent people raising animals the right way, doing all the things correct, cutting no corners, and at the end of the day, they're forced to take their animals to an industrial slaughterhouse, and you're stressing the animal out. The animal's breathing patterns become erratic, and when that happens, it actually shifts the pH of the animal, and
huh.
it affects the quality of the meat.
Wow, just over the stress and
Mm-hmm.
breeding patterns of going into a new environment right
Mm-hmm.
before being slaughtered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about the humane element about bringing the
Mm-hmm.
butcher right to the animal
Mm-hmm.
and then having a clean, instantaneous, no stress release, nothing.
Right, and then so there's this. It's a little gruesome, but it's a really interesting um, side detail that so one of the first things that we have to do once the cow is dead is take the head off and then take the cheeks off and take the tongue out. And since I was like lowest man on the totem pole for a long time, I was doing a lot of tongues because that's just like everybody else gets to go onto the cow to the skinning part, but I'm taking the tongue out of the mouth, and so many times I'll find like grass in the mouth while I'm taking the tongue out. And what that says to me is this cow was comfortable enough, because I don't know if people may not know, cows are a little skittish with new people, especially grass-fed cows, because grain-fed cows at farmer will come up and shake the bucket, and the cows come running over and be like,
Sensitized
hey,
to
hey.
food, yeah.
Exactly. But grass-fed cows, they don't have that, so usually, unless they're penned up, like you have to take the animal from, sometimes 10, 15, I saw 50 yards once, and wild animals, and so having a little bit of grass in the mouth means that animal was so comfortable with where they were up until the point of their death that they were cool enough to eat. If an animal if a cow in particular, wild like grass-fed cow, gets a little bit stressed, they'll start pacing, running around. You can see, we call it going hunting, because like sometimes we're in pens that are like 60 acres, and with like wooded areas and stuff. You're like, oh, we gotta. All right, you go around that way. I'll plan out this way, and it's the whole thing. So just that level of comfort then that the cows have upon death, um, and it's instantaneous. Like there is a really something it takes getting used to a little bit, is that there is a built-in mechanism inside, not just cows but pork as well. When they get shot, like they have to, they're like doing like a dog asleep running in place kind of thing.
Some nerves
Yeah,
twitching.
they do that, and it's this like mechanism that pumps blood, all the blood, because you have to go in back afterwards and cut the neck, and you have to, and it pumps all the blood out, and that's actually better for the meat in the long run to do that. So, but anyway, I don't know. That's more gruesome details.
Well, I mean, got to
Yeah.
have accurate information to
Right.
navigate the world. I mean, it's not like we
Yeah.
didn't come from hunter-gatherers.
There it is. There it is. But no, I appreciate that people like willing to understand, where their food came from. That it's they're like, I mean, it's a filthy job. It really is. I mean, like the you take the cow's body, you put it upside down on a what's called a cradle. It's just a series of aluminum pipes that are welded together that keeps the cow slightly elevated off the ground. You put it on a winch, and then you lower it onto this cradle. Feed her in the air. You take the feet off. You take the skin off. And then you hang it by its back feet. You cut the guts out of it, And like when you get then you kind of rip the skin from the back and you get the guts, and you have to spill the guts into a giant 55-gallon trash barrel. You have to make sure you save the liver, you save the heart, and the kidneys and stuff. Those kidneys usually stay on, so because there's a big kidney fat clump that protects the kidneys for
Did
curing.
those get fermented and reburied or
Oh, so
fed out?
the
Yeah,
guts, yeah,
all
absolutely
the
get composted. Yeah,
composted.
usually a farmer will have a skid loader or something like that, and you can just put them in the skid loader, and then the farmer will take care of it. Or if it's on our own property, then go up, and then we have just like this acres that we're like digging a hole, burying the guts, and then you move to the next spot. And
So this might be an area of introduction for the probiotic
you
cultures.
think it would speed up the?
Well, they're microorganisms that ferment organic matter, blood, meat, dairy, bone included. So if you're already burying it in the ground, then you're introducing microorganisms that have the strength and capacity to ferment all of that and make
Right.
it bioavailable a
Nice.
sizable amount of time quicker without
Nice.
any of the breaking off into methane and retaining the carbon and all that.
Nice. Well, there you go. Well, we've just figured out our partnership then. Yeah,
Sweet.
I like that. No,
That's authentic technologies coming together.
Totally, I love it. I do, yeah, yeah. And the let's see, there was something funky about this is just a weird side thing, but like one of the most difficult things to do, like just on the earth, is to take a fully grown beef skin that's like sitting on the ground. It's like dirty and whatever, bloody and stuff, and you have to pull it up and put it into a trash can. It sounds
The whole
yeah,
thing.
but the thing is,
How much does something like that weigh?
110 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
And a
it's,
big cloth at that. It's not like a
yeah,
convenient box.
yeah, exactly. And so like and you have to do it like very like slowly, one by one. It's fighting against you the whole way, and then like once you get to a certain thing, it'll like flop over and it'll like spray whatever, blood, feces, anything into your face. So you have
So you're not making some leather and curing any of that after the fact?
that
or
gets
or outsourcing something?
a lot of times it gets composted.
I was
But
wondering how that would break down.
Probably, yeah, I know, yeah, with all the hair and the fat and all that collagen in there.
Right.
I was trying to figure out for a while. So okay, on the basic thing, like people don't realize that it costs a lot of money to get those, like $700, $600 to $700 for me if I had a cow skin to get it tanned, which is a very expensive. Because then, like, what, you're gonna sell it for 900 for, I don't know, whatever, It's a lot of money. So it's really unfortunate that it's that much money. One of the biggest people in Pennsylvania who's doing a lot of that stuff, apparently they were just getting 55-gallon drums for the longest time, and the stuff that you would tan the hide in.
Okay.
And apparently the company's like, oh, we don't sell the 55-gallon drums anymore. You can do gallon drums. He's like, this is my whole business. All right, so they're like buying like a couple gallons at a time and just doing like sheep hides, and they're not like doing cattle hides anymore. And if they do, it's like, yeah, it's ridiculous. It's gotten so expensive. So it's
Gotcha.
really unfortunate. Yeah.
I guess the line that I was asking into was more just trying to figure out how are these things processed in a holistic way, where nothing's waste, everything gets repurposed, as far as our ecology goes, and adds up to a net positive by those
Yeah.
practices.
Yeah. And I think that ends up being a little bit of what we were already doing with the composting, and I think I'd love to. I'm probably gonna buy a couple of these guys off you and start like dropping them in the ground with them and see what happens.
Yeah, they're great stuff to introduce.
Yeah. So and it really just like, so I've had this thought for a while, and this is kind of an interesting idea, and I'd love to be able to put it into test, and it would be originally, okay, so there was a TED Talk a couple of years back of a woman who had this mushroom suit, like almost like a blanket style thing that you would put on a dead human body to when you bury it
To
into the ground.
inoculate it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it would just like completely pull it into the mycelial network. And so you imagine like you have like these fields out in Illinois that they're like, oh, there's 6 inches of topsoil left, and when it's gone, that whole thing. Like, imagine being able to take, like, you know, like going to the edges of those places, you know, and you don't want to go to the middle because it's going to be surrounded by poor practices, but you go to the edges and you start buying the land off or whatever, however you do it, and planting, like, you get like people to volunteer and be like, hey, when I die you can use my body to like repopulate the soil of this,
Yeah.
you know. But not just that, but any kind of like cow that's like
I got a big tree
uh-huh.
300 years in the future that some great grandchildren are going to swing on.
Yep, exactly, exactly. You could repopulate. You put the topsoil. You build it so fast using this and like guts and humans and stuff like that. There's this great story of the guy who founded Rhode Island. That when he was a boy, there was this apple tree in his yard, and he just like his family was always connected to the apple tree, and so he's like, when he dies, like, please bury me near the apple tree. He dies. They bury him near the apple tree. I mean, you know, and we're talking about 20 yards from the apple tree because it was a big tree, roots and everything like that. So, there was a flood on the property, and they had to like work some stuff around. They had to exhume the body and the grave. And when they got down to it, the roots from the apple tree had gone right through the side of his coffin and sucked him dry. They found like the roots in his, yeah. And so it's funny, like, you know, we eat the plants eat us.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's the cycle. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. There's seems to be some sort of disconnect at large culturally that we are organic, biological, symbiotic cultures of bacteria and yeasts
Mm-hmm.
in large part
Yeah,
of,
scobies. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
functioning organisms
Absolutely.
built up of smaller organisms that
Mm-hmm.
actually do interact with our environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating. It truly is. Yeah, and there is no life without death, and that's one of the things about like the that I try to like gently, sometimes not so gently, but mostly gently instill within, like, you know, people who are going through the you know, it's I feel like it's a, you know, a natural inclination these days to be like, you know, to experiment with like veganism, you know, or vegetarianism, and, you know, like,
Sure, there's a lot of that
and
going
there's
on.
plenty of people around the world who, you know, have lived long lives on vegetarian diets, you know, and been fine. And I really don't have that much of an issue with
Especially
vegetarian.
when it's their cultural diet and
Sure,
it's the only thing that they view in their whole life.
of course, yeah. But I do believe that like veganism can be sincerely like permanently harmful to people. First off, there's never been a vegan society ever in the history of, you know, no intergenerational vegan society ever. And I just like I do worry about like young impressionable kids trying to like do the right thing, you know, and so that's like part of it is like, you know, introducing this idea that, you know, there is no life without death. Like all the soil that you're growing your organic vegetables in is bone and blood meal, you know, and all the uh, dead bacteria in the cow's droppings that is fueling the food that you're growing, you know, and even like to a point where people are, you know, if you're any kind of small crop that's monocultured and grown in large swaths is probably going to kill voles, moles, rats, snakes, and everything when it's like harvested by large machinery. Whether that, sometimes even if it's sprayed, you know, like even organic sprays and stuff like that, like it can, you're still killing animals, you know, and it's like it's very difficult to
Let's talk about that. How ridiculous is monocropping and these lawn yards that we see, and just the philosophy of make one thing and kill off everything else?
oh, it's I mean, it's absurd and it's all profit driven. You know, I mean, I get the idea. It's like, well, if we're gonna plant it, we should plant a lot of it. But I mean, the essentially like the answer to a lot of this is we need 1 million new farmers in the United States right now who are going to do small scale organic permaculture or regenerative style, and they're going, you know, in the sense like that, you know, maybe you'll have like 20 or 30 like kale plants growing or something like that, but you're also going to have tobacco right next to it and all these other things, and you can use companion planting in situations like that, and you can use these permaculture aspects that are going to um, cut down on large swaths of vermin or anything like that. And, you know, you may still have to put some sprays in and kill some bugs, and maybe you might even have to kill some mice here and there. But you're not going to be, you know, like, so when you create this monoculture, when you, even if it's organic, you know, the soil is like almost homogenized in a case like that, where it's like it's only the soil that supports these whatever it ends up being. You can um, like you're creating basically a monoculture just in the soil as well, and I guess the surrounding area, like the any kind of animal that's like hunting on that area, wild animal hunting on that area, is now displaced. Has less room for it to hunt for its natural prey. So its children have a harder time to eat. So there's like it's this like kind of, I don't know, wave effect that goes out when you do something like that. So it's difficult, you know. This is why that answer is the million new small scale farmers, you know.
So you see decentralization.
Exactly. Yeah, that is the key to almost everything these days.
Is it ever more possible to get into a small farm, never touch a single inauthentic fertilizer chemical composition? Like, how possible is it to start up a small decentralized farm of your own and feed some extra people?
You know, being somebody who does not farm, it will be very difficult for me to sit here and be like, hey, it's easy, just do the thing, you know, like it's it, like it takes a certain specific series of circumstances, but but there's plenty of stuff like even for free on YouTube. People are leasing land, like this thing, like if you want to do the cattle thing, like it'll take a couple years before you're like actually making profit because you have to grow the cattle up. But essentially, you just lease the land and the grass, and if you live in a place with good like rainfall, you're not paying anything for food. You have the electric fence. You're moving the cows, and you just make sure that they're happy. They're getting their grass. It's like, so from that aspect, I mean, it's very low barrier to entry. You know, of course, it depends on like how like yeah, obviously you want to start small. You don't want to add on year after year as opposed to like adding too many things at once and having everything crumble. But I do think as far as like you're saying like keeping like the synthetic stuff out and like it 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 all, like I was saying with the chickens before, and the chickens and the beef, like it all kind of like interlinks like together. So if you have the one thing, it supports the other thing, it supports the other thing. um, uh, and that is essentially how we have to look at these things. You have to say, well, what can I get if I'm going to do this one thing? What else can I get that will be supported by this other thing? And a lot of it you can find out for free on YouTube. There's plenty of people giving away information, and so it's just a matter of finding the right people, finding the right thing that you want to do.
Let's try this. Maybe a bit more of a refined question with some thought on it. How is the black market exchange of regenerative agriculture? What might a solution be to really getting more people to fund decentralized agriculture? That it could be more popular to do so than to fund conventional agriculture.
Yeah. So let's see. So I mean, I've had wild thought. Like I'm playing in the crypto space right now, and part of my idea is like, when it pops off, when I finally get to a point where like I'm like basically quote unquote retired with it, like if that happens, like I'm not gonna like go out to an island, drink margaritas somewhere. Like I'm going to drop like millions of dollars into small scale organic regenerative farms like all over the place. And you have like a little bit of a blueprint. Hey, if you want to do chickens, this is how you do it. If you want to do beef, this is how you do it. And, I'm not gonna like, but like essentially like we just need we need people who like, I've thought of like having teaming up with like schools, or like people go to like a permaculture school or a regenerative ag, like Savory Institute is a big one for doing regenerative ag. Find one of these places with these people who are just like all about it, and team up with old farmers who have land that's not really being used right, and pair them with young farmers who are like super eager but have no inlet or outlet
Yeah.
for the thing. And then you say, okay, hey, here's 20 acres right here. I won't charge you anything for the first 2 years. Just make something of it. And like, obviously there'd be a vetting process or something like that, but it's like these are like, if just making these connections, just finding someone who's like very uh, uh, well versed on the land, on farming in general, and another person who has the energy to do it. I'm essentially doing that a little bit on the land that I'm on right now. Oh, guys, like, I don't know, he's probably like 75, 76 or something like that. His wife passed a couple years ago. He used to have it was for 30 years, it was this epic kind of nonprofit. He said at one point, I mean, he has 100 acres there. He said at one point they were doing, for like a decade straight, they were doing 400,000 pounds of food a year.
Wow.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to consider that. But acres upon acres of like different vegetables and stuff like that. And all organic, he says. So.
And that's a big problem on both sides that need to be solved, as far as the older farmer that knows what he's doing but isn't able to do it, and the young person that is able to do it but doesn't have the resources to really do it yet. And
It would be really cool. So I had this like loose vision for this Craigslist style website, which would it would just be like, it wouldn't be this flashy glitzy like social media site, but it would be just strictly information. Hey, this is me, I'm a farmer, this is the property that I own, and this is what I'm willing to work with. Hey, this is me and my wife, and we don't have anything, but we know all about this and this and that, and so, like, okay, you're just like finding like the right match for you, like that kind of. It could even be a community building thing, like, like style wolf style,
yeah, yeah.
where like, hey, we really need somebody who knows about aquaponics to come in here and set up our greenhouse.
Have you done much of the woofing or the hosting?
No,
Okay.
a little bit, but not much.
Yeah, I did some of the woofing. Great program, but it's just so hard to find places that know how to not turn into communes.
Yeah, that's a funny way to put it. Yes, but that's, yes, and like there are elements of the commune, socialist elements that are necessary, as far as like the community, the communal aspect of things. Like we have to like
Certainly, there's a level of
but then
need to.
it's a slippery slope right into like everybody just wants to eat kale and play acoustic versions of Wonderwall, and nobody does anything.
That actually takes. There's something on here that Stefan Verstappen created, and it's the ultimate guide to forming intentional communities.
Okay.
And it's definitely coming from the angle of how to kind of set yourself up with charters and bylaws. And as weird as it sounds, everybody signs something when they come in and join, and private ownership and rights are still a thing, but it's like you solve problems locally, you don't go beyond that. And
Right.
yeah, definitely would.
This is actually interesting. Like, okay, so in October, I am headed to North Carolina for the Food Church Conference. And so, a food church, as you could imagine, is a way to legally circumnavigate regulations.
Like a faith-based organization?
It's also called private membership association.
Yes.
Yes. So essentially, there's a group of people, and they all agree that they want me, Jeff, to be their butcher. And if we all sign papers saying we're fine with Jeff being our butcher, we understand it's not going to be USDA
Within
certified.
this private jurisdiction, outside of the public law jurisdiction, therefore.
Yes. Then it's all an agreement between private citizens, like, and so it works in a case like that. And I've heard there's the Miller's Bio Farm up in Easton, PA, that's having some like serious issues with like he had a PMA, and the feds came in and like made sure he like can't sell any more of his meat or butcher on process on.
Huh. I'd be interested to learn more about that. I heard the troubles people had was when they started mixing income streams between registered legal businesses,
I'm not sure if that was a part of that, but that might have been.
The other one that got in the way was when people would take the livestock that they raised on their PMA farms and sent them to USDA butchers.
Okay. Yeah, and this is essentially why mobile butchery is the way of the future. And
Sure, it's a part of that same organization of outside of the jurisdiction.
Are you familiar? And this is outside the scope of this chat, but are you familiar with like the whole idea of state nationalist, or essentially a sovereignty, like in the legal sense, where the so you can get
Not
your
as much as I ought to be.
there, I met a guy recently. This is something that I've been chasing for almost a decade, and like kind of loosely for like a large part of the decade, because I was like I didn't think it was real for a while, and then I met a guy recently who actually had it done. He has his passport corrected to reflect the fact that he is a state nationalist. He went through a series of steps with the state, and he has his passport stamped. And on the passport, in bright red letters, it says, "Do not detain, concealed carry, 50 states." This guy, this is what you call unfuckwithable, and you can get this on top of correcting your birth certificate. With a it's a certain number of steps that you get to become. A lot of people who use this are judges and lawyers, but the public is finding out. There's a big movement about it in Pennsylvania, and there's a decent movement I think in Florida and Texas as well of people who are figuring this out and starting little like programs to feed other people through. And
That's incredible.
if you do it properly, so the most of what this is filling out forms in order to like hold somebody accountable for doing something stupid, or you can get out of paying like speeding tickets and this and that and all the other stuff, but it's a lot of time commitment to fill out these forms and stuff. If somebody harasses you about wearing a mask when you go into like a shop and you say, I don't have to wear a mask and this and that, and like there's things that you can do and to like hold their feet to the fire, like and put these papers together. The last thing that you really want to do is ever step into a courtroom with this, because it's one of those things where over the last 30 years or so, people
Now,
have
now that you're sovereign, not paying the king's crown's not gonna get to
well,
play by the king's court's rules.
yeah, part of what it is that like over the last 30 years, people have like just been one after another has been arrested because they like slipped up and like legalese in a courtroom is essentially a different language, but there is no like service that is teaching us how to speak legalese. So it's been like a trial of errors, for people to figure out exactly what the right things to say and how to speak and like how to refer to yourself, how to refer to your property and stuff. And so finally, we're at a point though where people have figured it out, and there are people who are having successes in courts. It's just very dangerous to go into a court because if you don't know what you're saying, you say the wrong thing, you can get put into jail.
Canon will be used against you in a court of
Mhm.
law.
Exactly. And so, but if you play it right, if you take it slow and you learn this process, and I'm like, buddy of mine is all about it. He's far ahead of me in this. And he's just about to get his passport corrected. He's got his birth certificate corrected. He eventually there's this there's I still don't understand the exact like how it works, but there's essentially attached to your social security number is this credit amount almost that like the elites essentially use you as like a stock, as like a bonded surety, and it's worth millions of dollars based upon like how debt is like money is
Wow.
debt. Money is debt, right? Like when if I
The
have
money we use.
$500, it's technically negative 500, right? Because it's a debt, right? Well, this is all the stuff, and it's in the positive, and a lot of it is like hypothetical. None of it's actually. It's not like that. This money actually exists, but if somebody like focuses on it and pulls it into existence and calls their card kind of thing, then that money can become real for you. And some
Really?
people
You can
have
liquidate that even though.
so
Okay. Wow.
people have attached their card, their social security number onto all of their debts, onto anything. You just pay with your social security number and you attach it on, and you can like your mortgage, your any cars, any large expenses that you pay. Apparently, and this is what my buddy's working towards. And so,
Wow.
and this is ultra unfuckwithable kind of stuff. Now, if you were to able to attach this to a food church or a private membership association,
Absolutely. You're
I mean,
in.
then if you had a couple different people who are all like doing the same thing, I feel like that's the way, and
That would make such a hurdle for nonsensical laws coming in. They're not going to try any of the mala prohibita stuff. They're not
Mhm.
going to try and wreck with these people that already went through the process of knowing and exercising their rights and
You
sovereignty.
slap them on the hands a couple times, and they'll be like, all right, just don't, but then of course you run the risk of being infiltrated and COINTELPRO
Of
or whatever,
course.
So, but that's, hey, you know what? I would much rather be in a position where I'm causing that much trouble.
And here's the thing: nobody gets out of this life alive.
Yep. Right. Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly. So,
there's choose what hill you're gonna die on and what route you're gonna take to get there.
absolutely. Yeah. And I love the idea of just being like a prickly thorn bush in the side. This is why I want like regenerative agriculture. Like I think that is the cultural story of climate change that we're listening to pretty much bullshit? Yeah, I think it is. However,
Follow
is the
the
climate
money.
changing? What's that?
Follow.
Yeah, follow the money, exactly. However, does that mean we don't need to be concerned about the environment? Fuck no.
Of course, we have an active role as stewards of this
Yes,
planet.
exactly. And so people like lose that a little bit. They're like, oh well, the climate change is fake anyway, and so they're just like, well, that doesn't mean you get to fucking trash everything. But this idea of like, okay, pretend you're the World Economic Forum or you're like a UN super soldier trying to like take down all the, like you're not allowed to eat meat anymore. You have to eat the bugs, like
Eat some bugs.
if you're running like this like epic regenerative farm, and you're like, here's my life cycle report that shows I'm a negative carbon sink. Like actually in my
Yeah, all that carbon you're talking about being the problem and taxed. Guess what? I'm using
guy
it
right
in the
here.
plants.
Yeah, White Oaks pastures in Georgia. They do their conventional their carbon footprint is 111% lower than conventional beef. You can see it goes into the negative right there, which is even less.
That
than
is fantastic.
Beyond Burger,
Carbon
Impossible,
sequestration.
Soy, all that shit. So it's like, being able to like say, hey, I'm turning all of this land into beautiful, lush green thing that's pushing beautiful oxygen into the ground and into the air, and then I have all of these people that are all supporting. Like it would be so difficult for them to like come in with a straight face and like any kind of give you trouble, especially
Yeah,
if you have
bird flu's coming around.
yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah, right.
Uh-huh. Are you using those fucking PCR tests? Yeah, sure. So, anyways, yeah, that's so.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing all that. No, that was really fascinating.
Cool.
Definitely the decentralized agriculture is
Yeah,
the way
yeah.
of the future
It
because
really is. And
freedom's not happening the way that it's been centralized over the last 100 years.
Oh God, no. Centralization is just a power grab. I mean, it's essentially.
Yeah. Kissinger is famous for saying he who controls the food controls the people,
Of course.
and he who controls the money supply controls
Right.
the nation.
Give me the power to print the nation's money, and I care not who makes his laws.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's going to start with like we have to figure out some sort of like little central like hub type website where we can start hooking up. Yeah, somebody was telling me on the West Coast there's a something in Washington and Oregon called Farm Link. And
Like Farm Match?
it's Farm Match would be like where you're going to find things to buy, but I think Farm Link is actually like a little bit more like almost like the woofing scenario, but maybe more geared towards finding
Symbiotic
farm.
farms themselves.
Yeah. I'd love to, like so the old dude who runs the farm that I'm on, like I'm pretty sure we live in like. I live in a really ritzy like horse country, like horse people, like they're a little disconnected, but they're mostly all right people, but very rich, So it's like if I could find, and like I pass fields all the time. It's like 30 acres right there, like nothing happening. There's overgrown weeds on it right now. Like all the time, I'm like, I just want to go up there, knock on the door, and be like, can I lease that? Like, can I just put cows on your land, please? So
Maybe that's where you can fit in, actually talking with the farmers to open up the land for lease, and then already know the people that want to have the cows, and then you're just there being the problem solver that connects the two.
I'm trying to work it all out, and I say that like I need to find a way to like monetize a little bit of it, because I need to start hiring people to like we need to start just like imagining what this like ecosystem is going to look like, as and it would be really handy if I could use all these like rich people and all their land and all that, like, cause a lot of them were like raising cattle already too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna start knocking on their doors and be like, hey, I'm a local processor. Would you like me to process your meat for you? Like, So I could start like a buddy relationship, and then hopefully build it into this thing where maybe I have like coolers on their land where I'm curing the meat, or maybe they're like I'm leasing, like a couple acres of theirs for cattle and chickens, so just a couple hours of work a week, on the land, and for to move the fences and this and that. So it's not really even. It's not a
Yeah,
total.
it'd definitely be worth it for the right people.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely would be
Yeah.
worth it for the right people. Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, thanks so much, Jeff, for
Totally.
coming on and chatting
Justin,
some
thank
story.
you, man.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Absolutely, pleasure's mine.
Sweet.
Dig it.